This video contains spoilers for Wednesday Season 1. Once I saw that Wednesday got officially confirmed for a Season 2, I decided to do what a bunch of my subscribers have suggested, and I gave it a watch. And one of the first things that struck me about it was that it had a bunch of similarities to Marvel's X-Men. I mean, to be fair, it also had similarities to Harry Potter, My Hero Academia, Miss Pedigree's School for Gifted Falcons, or whatever that one was called. Really any story about a bunch of kids with special abilities going to a school with a bunch of other kids with abilities. And I thought X-Men would just be the most fun combination. So today I'm taking characters right out of Wednesday and putting them in the universe of the X-Men. Let's go! Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. Despite being a mutant, Wednesday Addams had never had any interest in attending Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. Both her parents had gone there as children and loved their time at the school, but that only made Wednesday that much more opposed to it. She had no interest in following in her parents' footsteps. She wanted to forge her own path. But she was eventually given no choice in the matter. Wednesday's mutant abilities were far from evident at a glance. Some people had obvious physical traits that revealed them as mutants to any who saw them, but Wednesday's were simply to have visions about pain or death coming to anyone she touched. She could have lived around normal people easily without being subjected to any of the bigotry sometimes targeted towards mutants. If it weren't for the fact that she openly flaunted her mutation whenever she could. If someone made her angry, she'd touch them and tell them how they were going to die, sometimes telling the truth and sometimes making something up about it happening soon to mentally torment them. After incidents of this at multiple high schools, her parents eventually decided they had no choice but to send her to Xavier's to learn to use her abilities more responsibly. And so she was taken to the school's location in Westchester County and left in the care of the current headmistress, Emma Frost. Charles Xavier had started the school and been its head when Wednesday's parents had attended, but he was currently dead for the third or fourth time, so the stern, white-clad blonde mutant who would grow to have little patience for Wednesday's antics was presently in charge. While Wednesday was skeptical about ever enjoying herself at every turn of her first month at this school, she would come to find some of the activities to her liking. Interacting with certain professors allowed her to revel in her more macabre side, which bordered on being her only side. She'd been a well-trained sword fighter prior to attending the school, and enjoyed the fencing classes taught by Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler. While partaking in them, she'd also do all she could to learn more about his demon father Azazel and his supervillain mother, Mystique. Wednesday would also goad Illyana Rasputin, aka Magic, into taking her on multiple occasions to the demonic realm known as Limbo, which Magic had once ruled over. While she'd rarely be willing to admit it openly, Wednesday would come to love her time at Xavier's, and eventually set the goal of gaining one of the most coveted positions in the school, becoming a member of the Xmen. Not because the idea of being on a team appealed to her in the slightest, but because being given permission to use her abilities to torment villains was very desirable to Wednesday. Another student who grew a desire to join the X-Men was Wednesday's roommate, Enid Sinclair, who also had no interest originally in joining the team, but for different reasons. While the two roommates would eventually come to be good friends, Wednesday and Enid had a rocky start to their relationship, as Enid was a near polar opposite personality to Wednesday. She was bubbly and colorful and had actively tried to keep her mutation a secret prior to coming to Xavier's. She didn't want to face the hatred that some other mutants got, but that was also harder for her to avoid, as she was the daughter of Rain Sinclair, who herself had been a member of the X-Men, among other super teams, under the name Wolfsbane. Prior to attending Xavier's, Enid only had some of her mother's abilities: enhanced senses, strength, speed, and the ability to grow claws from her nails, but she hadn't yet manifested the power to transform into a wolf-like state. Wolfsbane worried that Enid's abilities weren't coming forth because Enid was so driven to hide her powers, so she sent her to Xavier's so she could see other mutants embracing their abilities and their true selves. Wednesday was a surprisingly good influence to her in this regard, as were many of the other friends she made. She quickly came to embrace her new school and eventually, more so, herself, though it would still take some time for her to acquire her full powers. An important part of her growth came as a result of listening near non-stop to the mutant music pop sensation Alison Blair, aka Dazzler. Dazzler was so proudly a mutant that she'd use her ability to alter sound into light on stage when she'd perform to thousands of people to elevate her shows. Enid would play Dazzler's songs on repeat in hers and Wednesday's room. That is, until Wednesday threatened to smash Enid's speaker into 1,000 pieces, then make her eat the shards one by one. From then on, she wore headphones to enjoy Dazzler's work. But she'd eventually get a chance to see her new hero in person, as Dazzler was close with many members of the Xmen and would come to the school partway through the year to perform at their dance. Combat Professor Wolverine also didn't gel well with Enid's bubbly personality, but had been interested in helping Enid embrace her powers. Partially as a compassionate teacher, but also as a friend of Enid's mother. He introduced Enid to Dazzler one-on-one, and the mutant singer spoke just the right encouragement to Enid to give her the last push to embrace her true self. Wolfsbane had been, at times, too pushy and driven to bring out her daughter's full potential, but eventually the path she'd encouraged Enid down had allowed her to grow into the mutant she'd been born to be. Near the end of her first year, Enid did indeed achieve a full wolf transformation. From there, she'd continue to hone her abilities more and more until it was undeniable that she was worthy of becoming an astonishing member of the X-Men. Not every mutant to attend Xavier's was there with full endorsement or encouragement from their parents. Many, in fact, were runaways who needed to escape families who didn't understand or accept their powers. Bianca Barclay was someone who needed an escape as well, but more so because of what her mother wanted her to do with her abilities. Bianca's mother was a member of the Hellfire Club, a group started by wealthy elites as a collective under which they could gather influences to have control over economic and political matters worldwide. It had fluctuated over the years in regards to its morals, sometimes working in favor of human-mutant relations, but it was far from reliable, and Bianca eventually grew to want no part in it. Unfortunately, that was unacceptable to her mother, Gabrielle. Gabrielle had only been accepted as a member of the Hellfire Club because of Bianca, who, at a young age, gained the mutant ability of influence. She could speak a command to anyone and compel them to do as she desired, an obviously coveted ability for a group obsessed with power over world leaders. Bianca had changed her name and come to Xavier's on her own, telling nobody of her past life as a part of the Hellfires, though Headmistress Frost knew all along, being a past important member of the club herself. At Xavier's, Bianca quickly became popular and thrived as she'd been encouraged to hone her mutant abilities from a very young age and was very adept with them as a result. Beyond having powers of influence, she also had an aquatic mutation that would manifest whenever she touched water. Her skin would turn scaly, and she'd grow gills and webbing between her fingers for fast traversal. On top of that, she was also an adept sword fighter, easily the top of Nightcrawler's classes, even besting Wednesday on their first day sharing lessons. She and Wednesday would be rivals early in both their time at the school, as, despite being outwardly confident, Bianca envied Wednesday's lack of insecurity around what others thought of her. Plus, it wasn't difficult for Wednesday to make enemies as a result of her cold, sometimes compassionless demeanor. Still, through many mutual trials, the two would eventually grow to be not friends per se, but friendly enough with one another to tolerate working on the same team, as Bianca too would grow to become a revered member of the X-Men. Tyler Gulpin's journey to becoming a member of Xavier's school would be in even farther contrast to his other classmates. For a time, he'd simply been a troubled boy whose father was distant and worked as the police chief of Westchester County, making him constantly on watch for mutants from Xavier's causing trouble in his town. Tyler's mother had died when he was young, and he'd originally had no idea that she herself was a mutant. His own powers had remained dormant longer than most mutants, but when he was 17, his abilities were awakened by force. This was done by a woman with a passionate hatred for Xavier's school. Madeline Pryor had a complicated history with the school and the Xmen, having been a dark clone of past member Jean Grey and once married to, then abandoned by, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. She'd since wanted to see the school burn, and with her telekinetic and telepathic abilities, she'd sensed the powerful, monstrous mutation waiting inside Tyler. She went to the boy and used her abilities to manipulate his mind into thinking that the mutants at Xavier's were the cause of all his worst troubles in life. She convinced him that his father was distant because he was always worrying about what the mutants would do to their town, and even tricked him into believing his mother had been killed by mutants. With that stuck in his mind, it wasn't hard to convince him that Xavier's had to be destroyed by any means necessary. She helped awaken his mutation to transform into a lanky, monstrous version of himself so he could start killing people around Westchester to frame the students of Xavier's. He even became friends, and eventually more, with Wednesday to get into the school events without revealing himself to be a mutant. But Pryor and Tyler underestimated Wednesday's detective skills, as well as the willingness to help in rehabilitation from the teachers of Xavier's. After his powers and allegiance to Pryor were revealed, there was a battle with the mind-controlled mutant. He'd be apprehended, then the X-Men would find and take down Pryor as well. Tyler was then brought into the school so they could do all they could to reverse the damage done to his mind by Madeline. Emma Frost and multiple other telepaths and teachers spent weeks trying to help Tyler see that the people at Xavier's wanted the best for him, and that even with all he'd done under Pryor's influence, that this could still be a safe place for him. Eventually, he'd be allowed to roam free with the other students, who would further help show him that many of the mutants at his school were still willing to embrace him after all he'd done. He'd even come to learn how to use his powers on his own whims, and while he'd never become a member of the X-Men himself, he would come to be a willing student, eager to learn to embrace others' mutations, as well as his own.
I wouldn't put these up there with my most creative designs, but overall I'm pretty pleased with how this all came together. If you want more stuff like this, I've done tons of videos of putting different things into Marvel universes, but for more superhero stuff, I'd specifically recommend my Pokemon as Superheroes episode. Still planning to make a villains episode out of that sometime soon as well. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is from a man named Trevor Moad, who simply says that attitudes are contagious. Both positive ones and negative ones, so think about how the people around you are more regularly acting and how you yourself are acting. Everyone is going to have positive and negative times, but if the people around you are near constantly being negative, then you're more likely to become more negative yourself. And if you're always acting negative, that's going to influence the people around you to do the same thing. We're always affecting each other, so do your best to be around people who are positively affecting you and to positively affect other people yourself. I hope that's inspiring to someone out there. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.